Welcome back to another episode of Interesting Questions. I have a really good video for you guys today. It's about Emperor Qin. It's a subject that's always been very intriguing and very interesting to me. I saw a documentary on Qin many years ago. And it just really intrigued me. He is the emperor who built the Great Wall of China. He's also responsible for all the terracotta warriors being assembled to, they say his tomb complex is like 21 square miles or something, which is absolutely astounding. And he's actually buried in a pyramid tomb, which is very intriguing because he lived about 200 years, roughly 200 years BC. If you like this video, please share it, subscribe, and as always, smash that like button. So I'm gonna go ahead and reduce my ugly face so we can get to the video. Here we go.
Like the Egyptians, the ancient Chinese believed the items they took with them to the grave would accompany them into the afterlife. In 246 BCE, work commenced on what would eventually become the mausoleum of Chinese Emperor Qin Curse. The emperor would require an army to protect him in the afterlife, but instead of burying actual people with him underground, he commissioned clay reproductions of warriors, thousands of them.
Shout out to Weird History. They created this video, so I want to give a shout out to them. They did an excellent job in making this, by the way. I highly recommend check out Weird History because this video was amazing.
Today, we're going to list some fascinating facts about China's Terracotta Army. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other amazing archaeological finds you would like to hear about. Okay, we're going to China. Qin Shi was born February 18, 259 BCE, and lived until September 10, 210 BCE. At the age of 38, Qin, who was then known as Zheng, king of Qin, conquered the other warring states and became the first emperor of a unified China, as well as the founder of the Qin dynasty. Under his rule, feudalism was abolished and drastic administrative reforms were made in an effort to avoid lapsing back into the chaos of the never-ending wars between states. He developed an extensive network of roads, standardized weights and measures, and switched the empire to a single currency. Most significant.
Interesting. He was a unifier, so that's very interesting. Because the documentary I seen quite some time ago was that he was like evil incarnate. He was, there were even like stories about his tomb. If you were to open his tomb, you would release evil upon the earth. But in a way, I guess, he stopped warring between the state, all the different states of China at that time to unify China as this one empire, which I guess great men do, a great man can do, but I guess a dictator can also accomplish. So.
Chinese script was also standardized, giving the entire country, for the first time ever, a single communication system. In 215 BCE, the emperor ordered General Meng Tian to begin construction of his tomb. The project, situated underneath a 76-meter-tall tomb mound shaped like a truncated pyramid, would take 38 years to complete. Being a successful emperor means being able to defeat your enemies, and Emperor Qin was a frighteningly successful emperor. Not only did he defeat armies in 6 different states of China, he massacred them. However, for the ancient Chinese, beating your enemies in the living world was only a temporary victory, and there was a decent chance a guy like Qin might have to face his enemies again in the afterlife. It was this fear that the militaries from the states he defeated would pursue him into the afterlife that motivated him to build his Terracotta Army. In fact, one of the reasons the Terracotta Army faces east is because that is the direction an enemy would likely come from to attack the underground mausoleum. The emperor ordered the Terracotta Army to be built almost immediately after he took the Qin state throne in 246 BCE. According to an ancient source written by the Chinese historian Sima Qian, who lived from 145 to 90 BCE, over 700,000 laborers spent 40 years working day and night to finish the soldiers and the tomb. It's worth noting, however, that some modern historians have regarded these numbers as highly unlikely. No city in the world had a population of 700,000 at the time, and it's estimated the structure could have easily been built in just a few years by around 15,000 men. Regardless of how many there were, these workers also molded the legs, arms, torsos, and heads for the terracotta figures, which were then assembled together. Modern electron microscopes even reveal grinding and polishing marks that are believed to be the earliest known evidence for the industrial use of a lathe. Needless to say, it took a while, and when the work was finally completed in 206 BC, Qin had already been dead for 4 years. Many laborers and artisans died during the construction. Some were possibly even executed to keep the location of the tomb and its treasures a secret.
Yeah, I mean, Jin was obviously he was a warrior, a conqueror, and in some ways very brutal. And like I said, there are peace treaties, and then there are treaties that you derive from inside yourself to just say, well, if I can't find common ground with someone, then I'll just destroy them. And I think that was probably Jin's position. He was very brutal, obviously, and I'm sure probably he unified China, not with peace treaties, but maybe in some cases peace treaties with certain states. But I'm sure some of those states, when he unified certain factions, he gained so much power to anybody who would oppose him, he would just decimate them and destroy them. But he was the first emperor of China for a reason. He turned China into an empire. Probably not because he was a nice person, probably because he was very ruthless.
One of the most incredible aspects of the Terracotta Army is that while laborers only used about 8 different molds for the soldiers, every single one of the 8,000 statues is different and unique in its own way. Each warrior sports his own facial features, which were added in clay, and those who have seen them closely report that one can notice all of the subtle differences the craftsmen included to differentiate each soldier. Aside from being separated into different ranks, infantry, archers, generals, or cavalry, each individual.
It's amazing the intricacy that these people applied almost 2,500 years ago to take the time for their battle armor, and not to mention that no 2 terracotta warriors were the same. They all were different. They had different facial features or facial hair, or their hair was different. It's insane how much time and effort was put into this. So it really shows you Jin, what a very powerful and respected or feared man this actually was.
Individual soldier features unique facial expressions, clothing, and hairstyles. They also have varying heights, with the tallest ones, of course, representing the generals. Most of the statues are 5 feet 11 inches tall, but some actually stand as high as 6'7". One of the most surprising aspects of the Terracotta Army, at least to historians of ancient China, was that the horses in the army are depicted as wearing saddles. This was a surprise when first discovered, because it means that the saddle was invented by the time of the Qin dynasty, which is much earlier than was originally believed. In ancient armies, the cavalry and war chariots were extremely important, and the terracotta steeds, accurate in size to living horses, are depicted as well-fed, with erect ears, wide eyes, and open mouths. Some believe the horses resemble the Hochu horses who live today in Gansu, while others posit they're based off Hutian horses from Xinjiang. Whatever the case, the animals are good at climbing hills and racing and are very strong. In addition to the 8,000 soldiers, archaeologists also uncovered 130 chariots, pulled by 520 horses, along with 150 cavalry horses, most of which were buried in pits near the emperor's mausoleum. But surprisingly, these pits also contained non-military statues. Apparently, the emperor feared boredom in the afterlife as much as he feared the armies of his enemies, because he elected to be buried with statues of entertainers such as acrobats, strongmen, and musicians. Bronze ducks, waterfowl, and cranes also appeared among the human statues, a sign most archaeologists have understood to mean that the emperor hoped to be surrounded by similar animals in the afterlife.
I find it interesting too, the parallels excuse me, between this emperor and ancient Egypt, because they both have like the same afterlife ideologies, that they had to, build this monument, afterlife, like all these things. Well, I gotta build statues, and I gotta have this, and I gotta have that, and it's like, we discovered that about King Tutankhamen's tomb, because it was one of the very few tombs that were intact, and it had all this stuff in there, and it had like all these like all these different artifacts. It had like these sand slaves, and just like all these weird objects that this person thought he was going to take with him in the afterlife. And to think, Tutankhamen is considered to be, I think, 3,300 years ago, or 3,200 years ago or something. And this guy's like 2,500 years ago, but he's on a totally different continent. He's nowhere near Africa, where Egypt is. This is Asia. This is China. But these people had these very prominent, very powerful people had these same ideologies and the same concepts, that they were going to be able to take things with them into this afterlife, because I guess it's just, you're so powerful. Think of it. You're so powerful that you want to live forever, because you have this power, you have this wealth, you have fame, you have all these things that you're like, I don't want to give any of this up. I want to take it with me. But sadly, we can't. We know we can't. We can't take those things with us. Now we know. But I mean, I guess it's the arrogance of someone, an emperor or a pharaoh. That is their arrogance. Is you're not going to tell me I can't take these things with me. I'm taking them with me. And you create something like this, like this terracotta warrior army, and so on and so forth. It's crazy, man.
As far as anyone can tell, the Terracotta Army remained untouched underground for over 2,200 years. In fact, despite occasional reports of pieces of terracotta figures and roofing tiles being discovered in the area, nobody really knew about them until 1974. But in March of that year, a group of farmers, 5 brothers and their neighbor, discovered them by accident while digging a well in Xi'an, about a mile east of the emperor's tomb mound at Mount Li. Naturally, the Chinese government investigated the area, and it quickly turned into one of the country's greatest archaeological finds. While excavating the pits, archaeologists uncovered about 40,000 bronze weapons, including battle axes, crossbows, arrowheads, and spears. Amazingly, however, even though they had remained underground for over 2,000 years, the weapons emerged in excellent condition and free of rust. This is likely because they were covered in a protective chrome plating. While this technique was once believed to have been pioneered by the Germans in 1937, the discovery of the Terracotta Army and their weapons proved how ancient Chinese metallurgy was far, far ahead of its time. In modern times, tourists can get a look at the Terracotta Army, but unfortunately, they can't see it in its original form. Why not? Well, after being molded, the statues also received vibrantly colored paint jobs with pigments made from various materials. Intensely fired bones provided white pigments, while iron oxide was used for dark red, azurite provided the blues, malachite the greens, and charcoal was used for black. However, once buried underground for several centuries, most of the statues lost their color. When archaeologists excavated the area, the dry air took its toll and disintegrated the paint right off the statues. The lacquer beneath the paint curls in the exposed air, causing layers to flake off within minutes. Fortunately, since those original excavations, scientists have developed a solution with polyethylene glycol, known as PEG. This chemical, which guards against that kind of air damage, is now sprayed onto any statue the moment it becomes unearthed.
See, that's an amazing concept, because you look at the intricacy of those statues and how they were formed and created, and you just look at them in their glory as they are now, and you say to yourself, you go, wow, that looks amazing. They were even more amazing after they were constructed originally over 2,200 years ago. So they had color. They were much more intricate, outside of physically intricate in how they were shaped. No, they had color, and they had, their skin was colored, and their uniforms were colored. So that's absolutely amazing how much work really went in to putting a project like that together. And like I always say, people say, well, Daniel, they didn't have TV, they didn't have internet, they didn't have cell phones, so this is how people preoccupied their time. And yeah, that's probably very true. This is a very good prime example of that.
Today, we know that mercury is one of the world's most toxic chemicals, but the ancient Chinese, they considered it to be the elixir of life. In fact, Emperor Qin, in his quest to live forever, ingested mercury pills regularly. Not only did this not help him live forever, it very likely contributed to his death at the age of 50. The emperor's belief in mercury may also mean his unexplored tomb is surrounded by rivers of the metal. Chinese historian Sima Qian even claimed that 100 flowing rivers were created in the tomb and filled with mercury. While his account makes no mention of the terracotta soldiers, there's good reason to believe him on this one. Analysis of the soil in the vicinity of the tomb has shown extremely high levels of mercury. Even though the Terracotta Army was discovered over 40 years ago, only about 1% of the emperor's tomb has been excavated. At first, archaeologists worried an excavation would damage the emperor's corpse and artifacts in the tomb. But the biggest concern today is safety. The rumored rivers of mercury have left archaeologists struggling to find the safest way to excavate the tomb, if they can at all.
And that's something that I remember when I first learned about Qin's tomb. I remember they talked about booby traps, and they were saying, there's rivers of mercury, and it could be just way too toxic. Like, you may have to go into you have to wear an astronaut suit or something to literally go into the actual tomb, because of the levels of toxicity in the atmosphere in there. Like, you would not be able to just walk in there. Sort of like, I guess, kind of how they did with King Tut's tomb. But there's also believed that there's a curse on this tomb. People are scared. There's a lot of people who are afraid. They're afraid to go into this tomb because they're afraid that there is a curse. Just like people believe that King Tut's tomb was cursed, and that several of the archaeologists, especially one of the main ones, passed away shortly after excavating the tomb. There's also another mummy known as Itzi, the Iceman, and there's like a curse that was connected to this Iceman, Itzy. You can look up Itzy, the Iceman, and there's an actual curse that's linked to this Iceman. Like they had thawing ice, and they found this body, and they discovered that this body was old. I think it even had like it was so well preserved. They've seen tattoos on the body and stuff, and it was like in this weird like position when they found it. But oddly enough, like I think like 5 of the people who were involved in exhuming, you know, performing like an autopsy on the body of Itzy, like 5 of those people like ended up dying in like just odd circumstances. So I mean, people are very superstitious, you know, when you link things. King Tut, Itzy, and you know Jin. So you know, people, you know, they're afraid. There's a lot of people who don't want this tomb to even be excavated because of that purpose. You know, I'm sorry, purpose, but reason, because of their fear that it's cursed.
The terracotta forces of Emperor Qin, the warriors, horses, chariots, and even the emperor's tomb itself, are spread out over a compound that is over 20 square miles in size. One pit, roughly the size of an airplane hangar, contains the soldiers, a second contains the cavalry and infantry units, and a third holds high-ranking officers and chariots to represent the command center. And if all that doesn't impress you, keep in mind that there was originally supposed to be even more. The tomb is believed to be incomplete, largely due to the discovery of a 4th, empty pit that wasn't finished even after the emperor died. Between 2009 and 2019, Chinese archaeologist Shen Maosheng headed a new excavation of the emperor's mausoleum, and in January of 2020, the Chinese information site XinhuaNet announced that Shen's team had uncovered 200 more clay soldiers. According to Shen, most of the newly discovered sculptures are either holding pole weapons, bending their right arms with half-clenched fists, or carrying bows with their right arms hanging naturally, indicating each soldier's own task within the army. The new excavation is about 750 feet long, 200 feet wide, and 16 feet deep, and in total there are more than 6,000 clay soldiers and horses. The carved armor on each of the newly discovered soldiers seems to indicate their rank. According to the archaeologists, the new excavation greatly expanded their study on the military service system and military equipment of the Qin dynasty. It also provided new ideas for the research on the artistic style, characteristics, and manufacturing techniques of figurines in the period. So what do you think? What one item would
that blows my mind. And I know in another video that I saw, I think they said that this 21, or I've heard 21 square miles, I've heard 20 square miles of this whole complex for this emperor. And they said, I think they said only like 5% of this has been excavated. Like, that is just mind blowing. That blows my mind. It's just insane, you know. Man, I really enjoyed this video though. It was very interesting. I'm probably gonna do more videos specifically on this subject of Jin, because it's just fascinating. You know, I hope you guys really liked this video. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was amazing, and like I said, I will do more videos on Jin, because like I said, I've seen other videos and I've heard other things that I didn't hear in this one specifically. So hey, smash that like button, subscribe, you know, share it with friends, and check out Weird History. You know, give a shout out to them. You know, check it out. I'm going to be checking out their videos, because I'm sure they have a lot of more interesting things to look at. But that's the end of the video. Thanks for joining me. Peace.